about doing a worst 10 books of 2020, but that just felt a little mean for now. I didn't want to sort of drag any books through the mud. Hello, my lovely library lions. Today I want to talk about the 10 worst books that I read in 2020. I know I said I wasn't going to do a video like this, but I've been watching a lot of other people's top 10 worst of 2020 and I've been really enjoying them, so I decided I might as well make one of my own. They're not going to be in any specific order because I didn't really track them that well, so I don't know which I really disliked the most. Number 10 is A Whole New World by Liz Braswell. This was an Aladdin retelling. It's the start of the sort of Twisted Tales series for Disney, where they retell all their classic tales in a different way, usually where the villain sort of gets to win for a little bit. So this is about an Aladdin story where Jafar wins. He gets to rule over Agrabah as the Sultan. Jasmine is enslaved. Aladdin obviously doesn't win. The genie is enslaved to Jafar. And it's an interesting story, but I feel like their tones were really confused. They do a lot of really dark stuff. There's mentions of sexual assault, of murder, and then they still have the genie throwing around pop culture jokes and laughing, and he's like, ha ha ha, also my wife died, and it was tragic. And then he pulls out another pop culture joke, and it's like, I don't know if they should have done both of those at the same time. It was really awkward to read and jump back and forth between the, oh, this is the genie from Aladdin, the genie we know, and oh, also all this terrible stuff is happening, and Jafar is a dictator, and people are dying all the time. So I didn't really like it. I read another of the Twisted Tales series. It was Mirror Mirror by Jen Calonita, and I didn't like that one either, so I don't think I'm going to be continuing with the series. It's a shame because the covers are so beautiful, and it had so much potential to be a really fun retelling series, and neither of them hit the mark for me where I would want them to be to continue reading more, because there's so many of them to read. Number 9 is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. So this was actually included in one of the owl crates that I got. I wouldn't have read it otherwise because my friend, who adored the Haunting of Hill House TV series, read it, and she said, don't read it, it's a terrible book. But I got it in owl crate, and I always do try to read the books that I get in my owl crate, so I picked it up, and it was very short, and it was just terrible. So the opening of the book is what bothered me the most. It was a new release that Penguin, I think, was doing, and we start with this long introduction from Guillermo del Toro, where he introduces all the books in the series, and they didn't just cut to just the Hill House part, so you have to read all the intros for all the series, or you have to decide to skip through them, and then you're 30 pages into the book by that point. The book is 300 pages, and they have another intro by someone else, and you have to read 20 more pages of intro for just Hill House. And then the actual book is just a bunch of 20-somethings fucking around for 200 pages in this house where sometimes a door opens, or one time this girl gets grabbed by a hand. That's it. It's the one of the most uninteresting books that I've ever had to read. And I guess, of course, I didn't have to read it, but I finish everything I start because I just have to. Anyways, it was just ultimately a really unsatisfying read. I never really got a whole point where there was this is what we've been building up to, the big scare. There was never anything like that. They just messed around in the house and then they left the house. So I hated it. I know a lot of people are going to like it. It definitely probably appeals more to people who like classics and older books. I did not get any of that from it. I didn't enjoy it at all. Number 8 is Into the Water by Paula Hawkins. So I loved The Girl on the Train, which was her other book, and I thought, okay, that means I'm going to love Into the Water. And I didn't. It's really weird. I'm still not sure if there's any supernatural forces at play in the book. Nothing was really explained. It's just girls keep drowning in this river, and all the characters are kind of bad people. And there's all this other stuff mixed in. There's an affair with a teacher, and the teacher is on the run, and then some other girl drowns. And we never really figure out if the town is just really shitty and girls can't survive there, or if there's a ghost that's making girls drown themselves. I actually unhauled it because I disliked it that much, even though I had a nice hardcover copy of it, so it was just I don't know, I wish I would have chosen better what to be, because it was a really unclear story and it didn't really feel like it knew where it was going at any point of the book. So I just really didn't enjoy that. I don't know who would enjoy it, but I'm sure there are people who enjoy that sort of ambiguous, spooky story, and maybe that's for them then, and just not for me. Number 7 is I'm Not Your Manic Pixie Dream Girl by Gretchen O'Neill. So for those not familiar, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl trope is just a girl who comes into a man's life and is quirky and weird and sees the world in a different way, usually sort of naive and childish, and she changes his life and makes him see the world in this beautiful way. And then she goes away because she's only there for furthering his development. So I'm Not Your Manic Pixie Dream Girl was supposed to be a flip of that trope, and it just kind of wasn't. It did examine the fact that you can pretend to be a manic pixie dream girl and sort of explore what it would be like for a girl pretending to be that, but the girls who do pretend to be it get really popular and they kind of learn nothing. Just that, like, you can manufacture quirkiness and it makes people like you better, it makes men like you better. And then the story just kind of ends with, yeah, the man we were chasing after was terrible, and we faked our personalities for almost a whole school year, and maybe the guy that was my best friend is supposed to be who I'm with the whole time anyways. So no one learned anything. The main character was really annoying, and also the main character seemed to think she was sort of above every other sort of girl. Like, assuming the first Manic Pixie Dream Girl wasn't faking her weird personality, which obviously she is, like, no one is actually like that, but there's nothing wrong with her being like that if that's who she wants to be, and the main character is just always like, oh, other girls are gross and they are not smart like I am. They don't understand statistics and math, so I'm going to use statistics and math to get popular because I understand that. And I hate that. Thanks. I hate it a lot. I hate the I'm not like other girls trope, and this should have been a story about overcoming all those tropes that sort of pigeonhole women into being one thing, and it was just like, no, Manic Pixie Dream Girl is bad, but also I'm smarter than all other women, and other women who like these things are trash. So, thumbs down. Number 6 is Looking for Group by Rory Harrison. Sorry, I didn't remember the author's name. So this is a story that is about someone who plays World of Warcraft and his best friend and how he wants to go and meet her. And he does go to meet her, and he is gay, and they go on this road trip, and so it's already a road trip book, so I'm already like, oh, it's a road trip book. I wanted it to be more about the fandom of World of Warcraft, but that doesn't really come into play a lot. They mention it a few times, and that's how they met and how they spent most of their time together, but it's genuinely just a road trip book through America and, like, middle America road trip attractions. There are some interesting attractions mentioned. I liked that. But otherwise, it was just kind of, like, fucked up. Like, it was a weird story. We find out that the main girl is a trans woman, and the main guy is gay, but after he finds out that she's a trans woman, he's okay with being with her, which is not great. So I didn't like that. And there's just some very uncomfortable sex scenes, and it's just not a fun read. I was uncomfortable for most of it, and there was nothing in there that I wanted. I picked it up because I was like looking for group, and it's a World of Warcraft book, and I was like, fantastic. And then it was just a road trip book with some very uncomfortable implications. So I did not want to read it, but I finished it, and I'm never going to think about it again. It's gone from my life. Number 5. So we're down to the 5 final books I didn't like, but again, these aren't in any specific order. So number 5 is Shatter Me by Tahereh Mafi. Sorry if I butchered that pronunciation. I know this is a really popular book, so I feel like this is a controversial opinion, but I hated it. It started really interesting where it was like, oh, this is how the main character writes, so the book is gonna be written a little weird, but that's to show her like the mental struggle she's been through in this year in isolation. I was like, oh, that's fascinating. And then it lasts for like 40 pages, and they kind of forget about it here and there, and then it'll pop back in randomly, and then they forget about it again. Anyways, they did that, and I was like, oh, that was kind of like the only thing that interested me in this book was that super interesting premise, and you're kind of just throwing it away within the first 40 or so pages. And then the other thing was that the main character is very powerful, very chosen one, very special, ooh-woo, and everyone is in love with her. And I don't like to hate on Mary Sue's too much because I think it should be fine to have like a female power fantasy character. It just wasn't something I wanted to read. I didn't like how every man she met was essentially in love with her, even like the big villain. I did like Warner though. I loved him. I had the copy of Shatter Me with Destroy Me as a novella at the back, and that was, I almost wanted to read the sequel to see more of Warner, but I didn't love the protagonist enough to keep going. It's a shame because the cover of the series is so beautiful. I love the eye and like the designs on it, and I really wanted to collect the whole series just to have it on my shelf, but it's not a book where I think it's a bad book and I think it has any problems. It's a fine book. It's a good book. It's just not a book for me. Number 4 is Witchy by Arielle Slamet Ries. So this is a graphic novel based on a webcomic, and it's about a world where your hair length sort of controls how much magic you have. So one of my big problems with this book was, I know webcomics evolve, but it was like the art style is just all over the place. It was really hard to tell what the author was going for. I couldn't tell you what the main character's skin tone or hair color is, except that they are sort of darker skinned and have blonde to red hair, because the lighting changes everything all the time. It was also really awkward that the main character is hiding her hair length, because the longer your hair is, the more powerful you are. Just like, I have to hide how powerful I am, or else they will know. But then her hair is like as long as mine, and there's people in her class who have hair like down past their ass, and it's like, did you really have to hide this? Your hair is very average length, but she is more powerful than the other people in her class, so I don't know if her hair is supposed to be longer or if she's just special, but it doesn't seem like she should have needed to hide her hair with the length that it is. The other big problem I had is they had this character, Prin, who is set up to be like the bully antagonist, and I liked that. And certain point in the first graphic novel, I only read the first one, I didn't keep reading past that. So in the first graphic novel, you find out Prin is trans. And that's interesting. I like to have a developed character. But the second that you find out that she's trans, she is no longer the antagonist. Her and the protagonist are friends. There's no conflict between them anymore. They're just like, oh, I didn't know you were trans. I guess I like you now. And the girl was like, yeah, now that you know I'm trans, I'm your friend. It was just a really weird way to settle the conflict. I don't know why the protagonist finding out about her would make her be like, oh, well, every time you bullied me and made fun of me and made me want to kill myself, that's fine. Like, we're gonna be friends now because I found out that secret about you. And it's like, okay. So I didn't keep reading that, but again, the main problem was just the art was so inconsistent for me that I couldn't really follow who was who and what was happening. Characters would look entirely different, and sometimes when you adapt webcomics into graphic novels, they don't really have sort of a peak, they just are stories, so it feels like nothing happens in this whole story. The whole first graphic novel feels just null. Like there's a start of a story and then nothing. So I'm probably not going to keep reading it, but other people might enjoy it. Definitely I would probably recommend reading it as a webcomic so you can keep going and not have those awkward spaces sort of in between the story that the graphic novel puts in, where it just cuts it off to be like, that's a size for a graphic novel, we're not going to care about where the plot ends. So there's that. So number 3 is Liars and Losers Like Us by Amy Allen-Vath. And this book tries to do a lot of things, and I think that's sort of what messes it up, is that it tries to cover so many different topics. It's like, okay, we're gonna have suicide, we're gonna have childhood trauma, we're gonna have bullying, they just keep throwing things, and they never have time to actually deal with any of the things that they throw at you. They just keep throwing different topical issues, being like, hey, this terrible thing is happening, this terrible thing is happening, and they never actually deal with it. They never go through and like be like, okay, so here's how you would help someone who went through this, or we're gonna look at this character's trauma in depth. It's just terrible thing, terrible thing, terrible thing, okay, the story's over. And I just why did you do that? And the ultimate story is about sort of these girls wanting to become prom queen over the popular kids and being like, oh, the popular kids shouldn't get everything. It's just a very boring, overdone story, and there's this girl, the protagonist, who knows the girl who killed herself, but isn't close to her or anything, and she feels like, I have to champion this. We bullied this girl until she killed herself, and I have to do something about it. And her solution is to bully other people about how they bullied the girl. So it's just not a great moral, like, and it's also one of those books that sort of makes suicide seem like a big martyr play, which I don't like. They read like her letter, her suicide note at the prom, and it's like reading about how everyone bullied her and how hopefully this will change everyone's opinions, and I don't like using suicide as a force for change to turn people good. It's the same thing that 13 Reasons Why did, and I don't think it's a good story to put in fiction, especially into young adult fiction where you are targeting teens, because that is a very dangerous road to start down. Suicide isn't going to change anything for the better. No one is going to be like, oh, because this girl killed herself, we're going to be a better family at school. It's just not how things work. Number 2 is Winterwood by Shea Ernshaw. So this book is beautiful. Like, the writing and the prose in this book is beautiful. If you read it, you feel exactly like you live in this small town where there's strange magic and lost things appear in the woods, and the forest is beautiful, covered in snow. You can feel the atmosphere, but also nothing happens. Literally nothing happens in this entire book. There is almost no discernible plot. It's just 300 pages of very beautiful imagery. And maybe that is for some people. The writing is very nice. Maybe some people are going to enjoy just reading the writing. I wanted something to happen. I spent 300 pages being like, when is the thing going to happen? When are we going to get to the climax? And there just didn't feel like there was one. We just read about the forest, and then the book ended. Like, a couple small events happen, but none of the characters get development. There's very little interaction between the characters. They start in one place, and they end in pretty much exactly the same place. So why did I read this book? This could have just been a nice, like, a maybe 5-page description of the woods, and I feel like I would have gotten the same amount out of it. Again, the writing style, beautiful. 10 out of 10 writing style. Some of the most beautiful writing I've read all year. Story, I don't know if it was a story. I think it was just a beautiful description of some woods. So the number 1 worst book that I read this year, again, they're not in a specific order, but it was Wink, Poppy, Midnight by April Genevieve Tucholke. And so I read her first in the anthology Slasher Girls and Monster Boys, and I adored her sort of, she had like an Alice in Wonderland sort of retelling in like a creepypasta format, and it was beautiful, and I was like, oh, I have to read more of her writing. I'm obviously gonna love it. And I did read it, and it was just okay. I don't understand why anyone likes Poppy. She's a complete bitch the entire time. At the same time, Wink is also a horrible person, and so is Midnight. Everyone is terrible, and no one deserves to be happy. And the story just continues like that. They do terrible things to each other, and it feels like they're supposed to learn something. You're supposed to understand Midnight and why he liked Poppy and why he now likes Wink, and you're supposed to understand Wink and her weird family and the weird way she can sort of tell the future, but it's too weird. Nothing felt like it made a lot of sense, and I didn't like Poppy. I don't think she deserved to have any sort of redemption at the end. I don't feel like Wink and Midnight should have had anything. It was just weird. And Midnight was just the blandest male character that I can imagine. Like, there's no reason for any woman to like him. He must have been the most attractive man on earth, because there is no reason that anyone should have liked Midnight. There's zero. He has almost no personality other than he likes to read books, and he lets women do whatever they want to him. So maybe that is attractive. I don't know. So that was the 10 worst books that I read in 2020. It was actually a pretty good year. Like, these books aren't, not many of them would make it to the list of the worst books I've ever read, so that's good. It was a good year for reading. I didn't hate a lot of books. I always hope that I don't hate anything I read, but when you read as much as some people do, it's impossible not to hate anything, so I hope I have even better, worse books next year, books that I can actually recommend to people and be like, oh, I didn't like this one a lot, but maybe someone else would. But maybe I'll do a top 10 worst again next year, and there will still be books that I don't feel like I wanted to have read. I wish I could erase from my mind. Let me know down below what the worst book you read last year was, and how you felt about it, and have a lovely day.